Natesa Iyer didn't really have much of a philosophical background. He didn't talk very much to the people who knew him about what was going on inside him, but he did more or less indirectly say that he had a direct experience of who Bhagavan really was, saying always that that particular experience wasn't possible to communicate in words. He said you have to experience it for yourself just to know how wonderful and how sweet it is. And I would just like to read one paragraph that he told to one of his oldest friends a couple of decades later. Bhagavan is not something or someone that we can fathom with our minds. We have to admit our ignorance and our inability to say anything about him that is true. When we accept that Bhagavan is unfathomable, when we surrender our compulsion to understand and explain him, we fall into a deep silence that is the experience of the real Bhagavan within us. This is what happened to me. I cannot tell you anything about Bhagavan because the real Bhagavan cannot be explained in words. However, I can say it's a sweet taste, and you can only know it by tasting it for yourself. Now, Natesa Iyer, as I said, didn't often communicate with Bhagavan except for that one early Upadesha where Bhagavan told him to find out the nothingness in himself, but he was in the kitchen on occasions when Bhagavan spoke to the other cooks and gave them advice. And there is one particular quote that he overheard Bhagavan telling to one of the Brahmin widows who did most of the cooking, and I want to read it out because I think it's the only time in the Bhagavan literature where Bhagavan said something like this, and I think it's quite crucial for an understanding of just how important correct preparation of food is in Bhagavan's world. So this is what Bhagavan said to one of the cooks who was complaining about being overworked. Don't give any importance to what the body is doing. Try to go beyond it and be a witness to it. You think you are suffering, but actually you are being blessed by doing all this work in the kitchen because you are feeding so many devotees. You can pass on these blessings to the people who eat here by having the right attitude to the work. If you do your work with an introverted mind, the quality of food you prepare will change in a subtle way. Devotees who eat food that has been prepared by introverted minds will find that their own minds will also become introverted. Now, this is an extraordinary insight into Bhagavan's attitude towards diet. When I talked about self-inquiry, I mentioned that Bhagavan sometimes said that the best aid to self-inquiry was sattvic food in moderate quantities. When I said that, I defined the food in terms of its freshness and its ingredients. For example, fresh milk, fruit would be regarded as sattvic. Chilies, ginger, that kind of stuff would be regarded as rajasic. What Bhagavan is saying here is that the gunas in a particular serving of food are less dependent on the ingredients than on the attitude and mental purity of the people who are preparing the food. So what Bhagavan is saying is that if you prepare food with a quiet, introverted mind, then the sattva that's in your mind will be transmitted to the people who are eating the food in the dining room. By extension, I should say that the purest person in the kitchen doing the chopping and the cooking was Bhagavan himself, and since for most of his time at Ramana ashram he went there every morning and personally supervised the cooks and chopped vegetables himself, I think it would be fair to say that there was an immense sattva content to everything that was served in this dining room simply because of the circumstances under which the food was prepared earlier in the day. Natesa Iyer continued to serve in the kitchen, and if you spoke to him, as I did in the 70s, he would say, "Have I told you about the day when I witnessed Bhagavan's operation?" This for him was the highlight of his life. Bhagavan was in the hospital building having one of his cancer operations, and for some reason, I have no idea why, Natesa Iyer was in there with him. Why one of the cooks had to be there, I don't know. Perhaps must have been by special invitation. Natesa Iyer said we were in that room for about 3 hours. He said Bhagavan was fully conscious throughout all of those 3 hours. He said you could see the blood coming out of Bhagavan's elbows, you could see the you could see the pus, radium needles were being inserted into the elbow. He said it was a full-on, seemingly very painful operation. And he said Bhagavan was there in a state of bliss. There was a quality, a silence in that room. And he said it wasn't just me. I was a devotee. You expect someone like me to feel quiet in Bhagavan's presence. He said it was so tangible that the doctors themselves felt it. And at the end of the operation, he said everybody in that room, including the imported doctors who weren't even devotees, spontaneously prostrated to Bhagavan, because for the previous 3 hours they'd all experienced this incredible silence, this incredible peace in the room where Bhagavan was having his operation. Now Natesa Iyer said this was a key moment in his life. He knew from this that Bhagavan wasn't his body, and by extension he came to understand that he himself was not the body either. Now the next story was told to me by one of his old friends who looked after him in the 60s and 70s. He eventually became too feeble to continue work in the dining room. As I said, he looked after the old hall. And he had some kind of major medical episode that required him to be taken by car to CMC Hospital in Vellore. That's the nearest big, good quality hospital to here. And on the way there, he was constantly talking about Bhagavan's teachings on I am not the body. He would mention dialogues he'd listened to, he would cite extracts from books, and he got so animated talking about these I am not the body statements that he was told, no, you must rest, don't be so active, settle down, be quiet, you're in a very serious physical condition. Natesa Iyer said, my rest is in Bhagavan. I rest in Bhagavan's presence. I don't need anywhere else to rest. I have found the ultimate place to rest, and that place is in Bhagavan's presence. That's what I'm talking about. I don't need to rest my body because I'm not the body. I have found out who Bhagavan truly is, and that's where I take my rest all the time now. So he went to the hospital. He had some treatment. He was discharged, but I think it was quite clear that his days were coming to an end. At that time, he was actually living in this dining room. I used to come and eat my meals here in the 1970s, and there'd be this rather odd sight of Natesa Iyer lying on a wooden table in the corner of the dining room. At that stage of his life, he had one dhoti, one little towel that went round his head. He had a copy of Bhagavan's collected works and one copy of the Periya Puranam. Those were his only worldly possessions. And I think out of consideration to his immaculate service to Bhagavan, he was allowed to sleep in the dining room because that's where he had always stayed in his time at Ramana. Now, sometime after he was discharged from CMC, one of his other friends came to see him, and Natesa Iyer was absolutely delighted, not because he was healthy or because he'd had a good experience, because he'd just been given the knowledge that in a small number of days' time he was going to pass away, and for him passing away meant that he was going to join Bhagavan. In the 1930s he used to chant the Vedas with the boys, but he hadn't chanted them for many years after that. So he told this friend of his, next time you come, I will be chanting with the Patasala boys. I will be chanting the Vedas with the Patasala boys. Now this was a bit of surprise because he hadn't done it for decades, but what he was indirectly hinting at was that the Patasala boys would do their chanting on Bhagavan Samadhi, and he was saying, I'm not long for this world, next time you come I will have merged with Bhagavan's lingam in the Samadhi. So this is a wonderful account I'm going to read now. It's Natesa Iyer's final days, described by an Andhra friend of his who came to see him over the last 10 days of his life. Natesa Iyer knew in advance that he was about to pass away. Raju, this is the recorder of the story, he said to me in high spirits, Bhagavan is calling me, I am going in 10 days. The next day when he saw me, he began the same theme, joyfully, but with a slight change. Bhagavan is calling me, I am going away in 9 days. 3 days later, Natesa Iyer lost his appetite. The doctors who examined him said he was suffering from no disease. In those days, he slept in a corner of the dining room. The devotees there forcibly made him drink orange juice. The next time I saw him, his spirits were still high. Raju, only 5 days more. I'm going in 5 days. He pointed to his breast, put his hand there and announced, Bhagavan is calling me. His physical condition was deteriorating, but he was still full of energy. Natesa Iyer became very weak and was unable to take even liquid food. Fearing that he might die soon, he was shifted to a far corner of the ashram. A few days later, I went to see him there, taking a bunch of grapes as an offering. When he saw me approach, he opened his eyes, showed me 2 fingers and said, 2 more days, I'm going in 2 days. His eyes were shining like lights, almost as if he did not belong to this world. He looked like he was happily going home. Someone who was present said, there is no need to fear, you'll live for many more days. Fear, said Natesa Iyer, I have no fear. It's simply the calling of Bhagavan. The next day he was moved to the ashram hospital. I went to see him there. Raju, only 1 more day. I'm going to merge with Sri Ramana Paramatman, Sri Ramana, the Supreme Self. On the 10th day, Natesa Iyer lost consciousness, but his face suddenly became very bright. In a spirited tone, he inquired, has Bhagavan come? I'm coming. Those were the last words that came from his lips, and he died a few minutes later.